Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching from on the surface of the earth. My name is Bisi Ibitayo, and I'd like to welcome you to today's edition of Banter with Bisi. First, I'd like to say Happy New Year. It's the first time I'm doing this with you this year. And I'm really hoping that this year is going to be a beautiful one for every one of us, believing God to do wonderful things in our lives in Jesus' name. Do I hear an amen? Amen. So I'd like you to ask, join us wherever you are, YouTube, Facebook, Olabisi Ibitayo. And on YouTube, I'd like you to join in from Bisi Ibitayo. This is a live conversation, and I have a very interesting guest on in the studio, as I can say, today, who's going to be joining us as well. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic, boundaries and mental wellness. So there are two things, basically. Boundaries and mental wellness. What are boundaries? Why do we need boundaries? What is mental wellness? And I have some person here who I believe so much in the graces of God upon her life to be able to do justice to this. Why do I see a need in this? I found myself in the trap of not knowing how to say no and when to say no. And so a lot of times I'll find myself caught up in a lot of things. And I'm saying to myself, Bisi, you should have said no to that. And a lot of times it affects me to the point that I'm overwhelmed, that I can't think straight. I'm just so confused. And, it just weighs me down. And so I said to myself, if I could just learn how to put in healthy boundaries in my relationships, and I mean all my relationships, I think I'll be better off, really. I'll be a better person. And so I'd heard also people come to me asking me for counsel, wanting me to help, to guide them in so many areas concerning mental wellness. And a lot of times they're like, I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to say no to this person. I don't know how to deal with these relationships. And so I said to them, I said to myself, let's do this. Let's find out how putting the right boundaries, healthy boundaries in place can help our mental wellness. And so once again, I ask you to please go invite somebody you believe should be here to please join us. YouTube channel, Bisi Ibitayo. Facebook, Olabisi Ibitayo. I'd like to take questions, comments, and contributions. Thank you very much. And so I bring my guest today on to come join us. Her name is Chris. Hi, Chris. How are you today?
I'm good. Good morning. How is the Hamatan treating you?
Amazing. I love
the
it.
Hamatan in February.
I say it's a lot better than the heat we had to deal with in the past months, really. So this is quite refreshing and it's quite
much,
cool,
much
really.
better than the heat. Yeah, it's really
okay,
cool.
So you're welcome, Chris. You're welcome, Chris. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I believe we're going to have a very interesting conversation. But before we go on, I'd just like you to introduce yourself and what you do so our audience can get a feel of you before we get into it.
All right, then. So my name is Chris, popularly called the Wellness Boss. So basically, I'm a holistic living and stress coach. That's what I do. But I like to call myself a stress coach. I do not believe in stress management. I don't think stress should be managed. But I think we can master stress so that we can thrive. And then when you talk about holistic living, because a lot of times when people look at wellness, they only look at wellness in the amount of exercises that you engage in. Do you understand? So, but what I do is try to let them see that is a holistic point of view, really, when you're talking about your wellness. So we guide people into how each sphere, each facet of their lives can intersect, to bring out the best of them. So that's what I do.
Okay, fantastic. That's interesting, really. And you said stress cannot be managed. Did I hear that? I mean, that caught my attention, kind of.
Hello?
Hello, Chris. I can hear you very well. You said,
do I go on? You've gone off.
Oh, I can hear you quite well
right
from here. You said stress cannot be managed. Did I hear that in your opening?
Yeah, it can be managed. The more you try to manage, yes, the more you try to manage stress, the more you actually expose yourself to the effects of bad stress in your life.
Okay, so we
found out that in your mind, Go
on.
Right. So, I mean, like in your mind, because a lot of people, It's just the same attitude people have towards their weight. You want to that dieting or the food that you're eating is bad for you. So when you have that mindset that the food you're eating is bad for you, you refuse to take responsibility for your own actions, for how you have contributed to the weight you have supposedly gained. All right. So the same thing with stress management. It takes away responsibility from you. It makes you feel entitled. And at the same time, it makes you feel overwhelmed and weighed down by what stress is. And automatically, you begin to see stress as your enemy. So when you see something as your enemy, you consistently fight against it, right? But then, in recent times, studies have shown that stress is actually your friend. Stress is there to help. And a lot of times, why we experience stress the way we experience stress is because of the way we've been indoctrinated right from birth. Stress is bad, stress is unhealthy. But actually, when you see it for what it is, then your mindset changes. You begin to appreciate the stress in your life. You begin to see the benefits in that stress. And by doing that, you're able to apply these benefits in your life and thrive. That's why when you see a lot of people who are actually thriving, when you talk to them about stress, when they say things like, we see challenges as food, we eat them, so they don't see challenges as negative. They don't see challenges or failures as a mark or as an identity. So they see it as a tool for them to use to get to the next level. And that is the same mindset that a lot of us need to cultivate. So that's, in a nutshell, what I
you mean
do.
by that. Okay, thank you very much, Chris. That's brilliant, really. Okay, so we're going to our topic today: boundaries and mental wellness. And when we're talking boundaries here, we're talking about boundaries in relationships, boundaries and mental wellness. What is boundary? Why do we
You're
need
welcome.
boundaries? Okay, so what is boundary?
Yes.
What is it? Why do we need to have boundaries in our relationships? And how do they? So I'd like you to first tell us what boundaries mean and how it relates to wellness, mental wellness, and then we'll take it one after the other, because I got some very private chats like, okay, Auntie Bisi, I can't go online to ask these questions, and I have a lot of questions for you, really. So what are boundaries, and why do we need boundaries to have healthy mental wellness?
Oh,
Did you hear me, Chris?
healthy mental wellness. Yeah, you're very right. The first thing that we need to do is identify what boundaries are. Boundaries basically are a set of values that identify who we are as individuals, right? It's a values that identify who we are as individuals. Now, this set of values can be imaginary. What that means is they can be tangible or intangible. For a lot of people, without having a clear boundary, you tend to be, how do I put it? You tend to be more or less like abstract, because nobody can really place you in a box. Nobody can really say, okay, this is who you are or this is who you're not. And that is why it is easy for such people to have lives where they are consistently stressed, where they are consistently unhappy, because they've not been able to set those clear boundaries. Now, when you look at it generally, in a general context, boundary is a line that separates something from another thing, right? A line that separates something from another thing is like a limit, is an edge, or whatever, however you want to put it. But when it comes to personal boundaries are basically a set of rules that guide how people relate with us, how people behave towards us and around us. But before you can have boundaries, you need to also have values. You need to be able to identify who you are and why these boundaries are important to you. Now, there are different types of boundaries, right? So we talk about personal boundaries. Everybody just talking personal boundaries, but we also really need to break it down, because again, as I said, it's a holistic approach, right? So if you say personal, a lot of times you just assume, okay, it's between me and my spouse, just between me and my spouse, or whatever the case may be. But no, they are so it's so wide, it's so varied, but there are critical types of personal boundaries. So you have your intellectual boundaries, you have physical boundaries. Now, the physical and sexual, physical and sexual boundaries can actually, I mean, they fall under the same umbrella, really, right?
Okay, so go on.
In the sense that physical has to do with your own personal space, all
Mm,
right? People just coming into your space and your privacy, violating your privacy, people standing too close, inappropriate touching, you know, people looking through your phone or through your files without permission, you know, those things are what we call physical boundaries. Then you have your emotional boundary. Now, for you to be able to create an emotional boundary, you need to be able to be in touch with your feelings. I know that's one of the challenges that we have as human beings, to be in touch with our feelings. It's pretty much difficult to face our truths, you know, the ugliness and the beauty of our truths, and actually claim who we are. But that's one of the most important things that we need to do. Now, this type of boundary involves having to separate your own feeling from another person's feelings. So, but
wow.
how can your emotional boundary be violated? You know, when you take responsibility for another person's feelings, you are actually violating your emotional boundary. When you let another person's feelings dictate your own feelings, you are violating your emotional boundary. Now, when you sacrifice your own needs on a regular, you sacrifice your own needs on a regular so as to please another person. When you blame others for your problems, right? When you do not accept responsibility, but again, you accept responsibility for their own problems, that is a violation of emotional boundary.
Can I
Now you
pause you
can see
there?
that a
Wow,
lot of us
Chris.
are guilty of that.
Can I pause you there? Can I
A
pause
lot
you
of
there?
us are guilty of that. Then you have the sexual boundary,
Okay, can
right?
I pause you there, Chris?
What is the sexual boundary? Now it refers to basically, okay,
Okay,
yeah,
okay, thank
yes,
you.
you can.
I want you to
Yes, you
say
can.
a bit more we're talking, you're explaining emotional
Yes,
boundaries,
you can.
and I believe a lot of people will be able to relate. You said something, you said separating my feelings from another person's feelings, that it's important. When I stop letting other people's feelings violate, can you
Yes.
give me examples, practical examples to know how this is and what exactly this is? Do you understand? Can you make it in a way that I can relate?
Mm, mm. Okay, when you let another person's feelings dictate your own feelings, for instance, your ability to be happy is dependent on another person's need for happiness. And
Okay.
well, that's you know, when you have dependent relationships, when you have people who depend on other people for what they need emotionally, right? At that point, they do not have boundaries anymore. Anything goes because they've placed all their needs on this other person. So if that person is in an angry mood, right, you find yourself automatically being angry. So you're being controlled by that person's emotions. Now that is a boundary. You have a right to your own self, for your own self to be happy, right? In spite of whatever it is that's going on around you. And that is what setting boundaries is all about. It's all about self-care. It's all about self-love. And that's what a lot of people forget. All right. We've all been in that situation where I've had my kids who would come to me, and this is just an example, who would come to me and say that, okay, for instance, now I tell them my kids are not picky eaters. They are not picky eaters at all. But then I noticed something. If they go to school, they come back, they tell me, Mommy, I don't want onions in my food anymore. I'm like, why don't you want onions in your food? Well, because Ngozi does not have, her mommy doesn't put onions in her food. Then I tell them something. I say, it doesn't matter what Ngozi's mom is doing for Ngozi. That is Ngozi. You do you. In our own house, in our own home, we eat onions. Do you get what I'm saying? We are able to do that because we have set a boundary in our own home. Our own boundary is we eat anything. All right. We don't allow what other people are eating outside dictate to us what to eat in our own home. The same thing goes for other families as well. But you find that there are some people that other people boundary violation. When you don't have boundaries, can we say you have been violated? And that is where the problem is. When there is no clear cut line, when the demarcating line cannot be seen. All right, that is where a challenge is, because you cannot pinpoint. By the time you start having emotional challenges, by the time you start having mental challenges, you really can't pinpoint where the problem is. So that's why sometimes when we are having our sessions, by the time you're done, you then realize that, but hey, you allowed people too much access to you because you did not enable your boundaries. Again, because you did not know you needed to have boundaries. So by the
Okay,
time we
can
started
I
setting boundaries for them, by the time they started realizing that, hey, I also need
need to
to
do
be
that?
able to, because we are all human beings, we are all individual identities, all right,
Yeah.
that
Can
ought
I come
to
in
be
there, Chris?
expressed.
Can
But
I come in
there are
there,
some
Chris?
personalities that are stronger than
Okay.
others. And if you're not assertive enough, the stronger ones, and it is a rule of, yeah, yeah,
Okay, yes. I think the feedback at your end is a
yeah,
bit, I don't know what's happening really. But can I ask this question? You said something, you're talking about boundary violation. But I recall
yeah,
that when you started your opening, and it really struck me,
yes.
you said we can't set boundaries unless we have values, right? Ooh, we lost that connection. Oh, I'm going to have her back. I hope she's able to come back on. I recall she said something about if you don't have values, you cannot set boundaries. So I'm hoping that Chris can come back on. We're talking today about boundaries and mental wellness. And our guest today, Chris, has been talking to us about the type of boundaries we need to set. She talked about the intellectual boundary, the physical, which also fall out to the sexual boundaries. She also talked about the emotional boundaries. She's talked about the emotional boundaries being essential because we all have feelings and it's essential for us. Back, is your camera on? Fine. Thank you, Chris. You're back. It's good to have you back. I was just running through. You said something when you were talking earlier. You said it's impossible. You said we cannot set boundaries if we do not have values, right?
Yes, yes.
So can you explain that over? So, Chris, you've gone off again. And she said also, talking about emotional boundaries, she said we have to be in touch with our feelings. And I just want her to talk about the fact of how values, how having values affects me having boundaries. Chris, you're back on again. Can we have your camera on, please? She says, when we let other people's, okay, Chris, you're on air, but we can't see you. We can't hear you either. So, okay, now you're back. So, Chris, could you please go on and
Yes,
explain
I'm
to
back.
us? Okay, could you go on about that place about the values? You need to have values in place before you can talk
Mm,
about putting up boundaries. And this is important. I don't want you
mm.
to stay just on I want you to extend it to the workplace and things like that. How do we bring this into play? Please explain to me what you mean about having values would help you set up boundaries and have healthy boundaries. Please go on,
Okay.
please.
O- Okay, so when we talk about values, we're actually talking about your identity, those things that set you apart from another person, those things that identify what you stand for, what you believe in. Now, before you can even begin to understand what your values are, you need to be able to understand who you are. All right, you need to be able to have an introspection of of some sorts. Go deep within and really be honest with yourself. Really peel all the layers of your personality and find out what it is that makes you tick. A lot of times what we think are our values are basically cultural notions that we have inherited. Okay, but these things are really not our values. These are just things that we have inherited. So it's important that we have values that represent us, basically. So by the time you know what your values are, for instance, now when we talk about values, are you honest? Do you get? Are you honest? Are you driven by money? Now, if you're driven by money, it basically affects every other aspect of your life, right? It affects how you relate at work. It affects how you relate with your friends. It affects how you relate with your romantic partners, all right? Because your focus is money. But if your value is driven by integrity, your value is driven by honesty, it also reflects in everything. Now, if you're the type of person that says, okay, this is what I stand for, Even though I like money, even though I want to make money, but again, I'm not going to make money at the risk of my health. I'm not going to make money at the risk of my well-being. Now, that is a value. You notice that once you have that type of value, it kind of like defines even your relationships at work, right? If you have a boss, a stressful boss, you understand that, hey, my value, I can't do this at the risk of my health. I can't do this at the risk of my well-being. So it guides how you relate, it guides how you connect. It's like much easier for you anyway, all right? Because by the time you're able to do that and you're able to set those boundaries, right? You're able to set those boundaries, you find that sooner or later it's pretty much difficult for human beings to hide by boundaries. We really don't like rules that much, do we? Human beings
Okay,
really
I'd like
don't. So
why
that's
is
why it's
that?
important for us to be
So why is
assertive.
that?
Why
Why is it
human beings
difficult?
don't like
Like,
rules?
yes. Why? Why is that? I mean,
Well,
if it's going to if it's going to have a positive impact on my mental wellness, why won't I like something that will do me good, Chris? It's true, but I'm just asking why. I'd like you to tell us why, since you're the expert.
people 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 are not used to being told what to do. Generally, people don't like being told what to do because they want to believe that they know what they know. All right, and they want to believe that they have undiluted access to this person or to this person's space, especially if they have a sort of relationship with that person. So if I say I'm your friend, Bisi, I feel it is okay for me to call you at odd hours of the day and night. After all, it's Bisi, not my friend.
Mm.
It's okay for me to say anything that I want to say. Meanwhile, without recognizing that you have boundaries, because maybe you did not spell out the boundaries to me properly. But even if you did, sometimes to push the envelope a little bit, just to test, to see, this person said, okay, let's just see, are you sure? Is she serious? Or, that kind of thing. So that is how it is. But the more assertive you are, the more firm you are, the more consistently you hold on to what your values are, you find that people begin to toe them
To
line,
respect her. Okay, let me
and then
come
you
in here
begin to
now.
trace.
Fantastic. Let me come in here. I had a
Yeah.
conversation with someone in his 30s. They came to see me in the office in the course of the week. And we were talking, and he had
Right.
had issues growing up and stuff. And so he had grown up being helpful to everybody. And he said to me, Auntie, he says, I just find myself saying yes. I find myself saying yes. And I just don't know how to say no. But the point now is he's at a point in his life that he has come to realize that he's living life for everybody else but himself. And so there's this feeling of
Mm,
dissatisfaction. Like he's just not real. He feels
mm,
like I don't even know me. Okay, so how can we help such a person? He says, I don't
mm,
even know how to say no because he has grown so used to saying yes to it. So at work, he's doing stuff with his friends, his mates. So he goes, everybody goes, don't worry, go and meet Chris. She will help you. I should be it's Chris. So how do we do that? And it's not affecting him. I mean, like speaking to him, I almost wanted. I wish I could just hug him because he was so just listless, like confused and
oh,
everything. So please,
oh,
help such
oh.
people because I know there are people listening. Go on, please.
Yeah. I think one of the first things that you need to ask him is, why do you feel the need to constantly say yes? That would be a pointer. Why do you feel the need? Most times when that need actually fills a void in their lives, all right? And until
That's
they are
it.
able to
That's
locate
it.
what that void is, it will be practically impossible for them. No, it's going to be impossible because you
Okay.
become very
Can I hold you there,
comfortable.
Chris?
That is
Can I hold you
where
there,
you
Chris,
get
please?
your,
I'm so sorry.
yeah.
I want to answer you on that so that it would help the conversation. I had a conversation
Right.
with him, private conversation, but I know there are people here who are listening and we need this. Okay, so the void
Mm,
is growing up, he was neglected. He's about 30. Growing up, he was neglected.
mm,
When you're born into a family where maybe they're done having children and you come, you're the last child, and the gap between you and the last person is so
Right.
wide, and so everybody just leaves you to yourself. So there was a void, right? I get the right, I get the counsel and whatever, but I just want to hear from you. So
Right.
that's the
Right.
void. I'm helping you fill in the gap. So tell me, I
Right.
know my void,
Right.
Chris.
Right.
I was neglected growing up. So how can you help me not to keep saying yes to people just because I want to
Mm.
feel the void of the loneliness?
One thing is to stop dwelling on your past. You stop dwelling on your past. Focus on your present. You know, we talk about, a lot of us have baggages. A lot of us come from families with stories, with experiences, and we've allowed some of those experiences to seep into our present lives. When we consistently bring up issues from the past to define what we are identity, and we find that we can't run away from that. So we need to be able to sit down and, again, as I said at the beginning, we need to be able to peel off the layers. That's, who are you? Without being the last born, who are you? Who are you minus all those other things by yourself for all these years? It takes some time. It takes a lot of depth to be able to bring you. And for some people, it's really painful. All right, because by the time they do that, they realize that, oh, I've wasted so much of my
Yeah.
life focusing on this when I could have been. That's why when we say that, we try to say, yeah, we are all a function of nature and nurture. All right, we are all a function of nature and nurture. Nature, how, I mean, just our psychological self, how we were born, what we were born to be. Then nurture, what our experiences, what our environment have morphed us into becoming. But the beautiful thing about humanity evolve, we get to have that privilege of evolution, right? And the only thing constant with us is change. But if you're unable to open yourself to accept change, you find that you still, because that is your comfort zone. I'm the last born. All
Yes.
right. Some people are addicted to the stories of their lives. Some people are, so they cannot see themselves outside that box, what they have been for 20 something years, for 30 something years. It's impossible, right? So, but people need to be able to learn that they have the ability, they have the power in their hands to actually determine what step they need to take. For him to begin to start feeling bad that he's consistently saying yes and saying yes is already a pointer to him that something is wrong. That is a part of him that is speaking out. So he needs to listen to that.
Okay, thank you
Right.
very much,
Yes.
Chris. I think I'll just do the sign language. At least that way the throwback. Okay, somebody is
Yes.
asking because it's a live chat. Someone is asking here. Cephas. Hello, Cephas. It's good to have you on the program. Cephas says, can boundaries be moderately flexible or
Hi.
absolutely rigid? That's one. He says, where is the place of tolerances and sacrifices provided they are not harmful? I think he has answered the question by the provided they're not harmful. So let me take his question again. I don't think if you, I'm not sure if you can see it on YouTube. He says, can boundaries be moderately flexible
All
or
right.
absolutely rigid? Where is the place of tolerances and sacrifices provided they're not harmful? Thank you very much for that question, Cephas. Go on, please.
Okay. Moderately flexible. Let me see if I get that. And absolutely rigid. Well, there's
Yes.
nothing that's rigid in life. I mean, you can't be too rigid. You can't, because being too rigid, you're also committing the crime of being on the extreme, the other side of the spectrum. All right. So there's no balance, there's no homeostasis, so to speak. So you can be moderately flexible because, again, we are controlled, in quotes. There are certain things that we can't control. And like I always tell people, when those things happen, you need to be able to learn to discern those things you have power over. Those things.
Hi, Chris, we can't hear you. Your network has dropped. I can't hear you. Hi, Chris. Hello, Chris. We can't hear you. I'm sure you can hear me. We can't hear you. And I hope Maybe you need to go out and come in. I don't know. Your network has dropped considerably. I think I can try. I can answer that question, and I'll use scriptures because I can't erase the fact that I'm a child of God, and my point of reference in life is actually scriptures. Just to answer Cephas's question, moderately flexible or absolutely rigid. And as he asked that question, what came to my mind was the story of Moses and his father-in-law. And I'm using scriptures now. Like I said, my point of reference is the word of God, and it's such a deep point of reference. And I remember then, before his father-in-law came into the picture, Moses would always want to be everything to people because he was a judge, he was, well, so to speak, and so he had a lot of people he had to care for. And he would sit down from morning to night, doing everything for these people and being everything to them as well. Thank you for coming back, Chris. Just hold on a second. I'm
Thank you
trying to
so much. Explain something.
So I'm saying that the question Cephas asked, that what comes to my mind readily is the story of Moses in the Bible, when he was being everything to everybody but himself. And I remember his father-in-law said to him, you will not only wear yourself out, you will also wear these people that God has put you in charge of out. So there's no middle way between it. You just have to be, I mean, there's no tip over. There's nothing like moderately flexible or absolutely rigid. It is harmful to you, not just to you, but to the people you are caring for. Because the father-in-law said to Moses, he says, you will not just wear yourself out, you will also wear out the people that God has put you in charge of. So
yes.
So sacrifices, yes, but when it's affecting you, I mean, I'm sure Moses must have become grouchy. I'm seeing him going home to Zipporah, his wife, and Zipporah is going, Moses, how was your day? And he groans, and he's talking to Zipporah, and Zipporah and the children are like, Daddy Moses, Daddy, you're back. And Moses just pushes them away. And so the father-in-law is watching. It's affecting your marriage. It's affecting the people you're judging, because after a while, your mind is not even there again. I mean, so that's the way I say it. So, Cephas, I hope that has answered your question. We need the wisdom of God in this. But a lot of times, God is shouting wisdom to us.
Yeah,
He's saying,
you need the serious discernment.
So go on, Chris. Please go on, Chris. I think, yes, you can go on.
Okay, so I think you've basically answered. When you talk about moderately flexible and absolutely rigid, what I was able to control, there are certain times that you might need to bend over a little, and there are certain times that you might actually need to be to violate your boundaries. So there are times that you need to be so as to be assertive and firm, and then there are also times where you can be moderately flexible because you don't know what the other person is going through. You don't know. For instance, let me give an example. Maybe you tell someone that, hey, under no conditions, because I don't like people using my car for anything. So under no conditions should you drive my car. And if you have to drive my permission from me, all right? Now that is a boundary that this person has set. Now, for some reason, an emergency comes up and this guy is not available, or probably the person is sleeping, and you quickly just want to go dash down the road or something and pick up something, and maybe it has to do with a life or death situation, and you do that. What you've done is you violated his boundary.
Chris, you're gone off again. Chris, you have gone off again. I can't hear you. We can't hear you. Your network is showing red.
But there you can be, the person can afford to be moderately. Has to do with the weather.
Okay. Hi, Chris. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. I think this thing, maybe the weather is contributing to it.
Okay, yes. I mean, that's Nigeria for you. So what are we talking about here? Okay, so let's just go back. I think we've been able to deal with that one and that. Okay, so someone sends me a question, a personal question, and goes to me. It's easy. I want to read it out the way she put it, really. Okay, she says, how do I set boundaries in the workplace with downsizing at work and with the impact of COVID, even though I know my boss crosses boundaries? This is affecting my marriage. It's affecting my mental wellness. What do I do? How do I set boundaries? Work.
Some bosses really don't know how to respect people's boundaries. That's the
Mm,
challenge, especially in our climb. You know, they feel that once we employ you, we own you 24 hours a day. Again, what I said about being assertive and being firm comes to play here. And the person also really needs to put into context what her priorities are. What are your
mm,
priorities? If your well-being is your priority, then it will drive you to being as assertive and as firm as you need to be.
mm,
Now, being assertive, being firm is not about being rude. All right. You can
mm,
devise a means, you can devise a way. You understand your workplace, you understand your boss. But devise a means, devise a way to go about it in such a way that your boss sees it and says, okay, because there are times I had to when I was working, I've say, okay, I don't work on Saturdays and Sundays. Actually, it took a lot for my boss to take because he saw it as rude. But eventually he got to accept it because on the ensured, what I ensured was the days that I was working, I ensured I met up and tried to even situations that were expected of me. So you have no complaints if I didn't show up on
mm,
Saturday or Sunday. So those are the things that you should also look at again.
mm,
If we understand about the downsizing, again, what are your values? What are your priorities? If your boss knows that you're driven by money and knows that you are willing to do anything for money, then he will take advantage of you
mm,
because after all, is it no money?
mhm, mhm,
So if you've not been able to make it clear, because a lot of times one of the stuff,
mm, mm. Good, good. Okay, so
okay, I
if
thought
I
you
if
wanted
I
to
heard
ask a
you,
question.
yes, if I heard you correctly, so answering that lady's question about bus and work and overdoing, you said there's a need to be assertive. We should put into context our privileges, in without coming across as being rude. We should ensure
Mm-hmm,
that we communicate effectively. Okay, now, so this lady
mm-hmm,
lands in the hospital, and her husband doesn't have a job, and she's
mm-hmm,
more like the one fending for the family. Her boss is not
mm-hmm,
ready to give. I mean, he's not shifting because I know
mm-hmm.
with this COVID thing, people are working more hours than if they were at work. And so, what would you advise
Yeah.
such a person to do? She goes to me. She goes, Auntie, it's my, I'm like I'm going crazy. That's the way she said it, really. So, what would you advise her to?
She has to learn to create structures. If it's a situation where she's found herself where she can't run away from just like this, all right, because people have to feed. They need money, they need to feed. So she needs to be able to set clear structures. Again, as I said, what are her values? What is her priority? If her self-care is her priority, she should be able to set clear structures. Again, as I said, time yourself, prioritize, all right? Try not to multitask. A lot of times we multitask from a position of there's this feeling when you look at people who are organized, a lot of times they were not organized from birth. They trained themselves to be organized, right? Because they were able to prioritize and they were able to set time aside for themselves. So it does not matter how much work your boss gives you. The point is that we all have 24 hours in a day. How do you assign each hour of every day without you being overworked? And again, your mindset is very, very important. If you are again, you know what I talked about stress, right? If you
Yeah.
have a negative attitude towards stress, it's gonna play out that way for you. So you're not seeing the benefits of that stress. All you're seeing is the problems associated with stress. So you're constantly complaining, you're constantly this, you're constantly that. The point is, by the time she starts looking at the positive aspect of it, which is number one, she has a job.
Yes.
Number one, she's being paid. Others don't have jobs, right? Number three, she's probably healthy. She looks at that and she looks at, okay, so how can I make myself the best? How can I make this situation the best for me? Not just me, but for my family. Eventually, she's the one that's going to have to decide that because she knows her own peculiarities. But it's important for her to be able to set her priorities. And, basically, when you tell people to stop complaining, sometimes it sounds a bit harsh, sometimes it sounds a bit unfeeling. But the truth is that once you complain, you put yourself in a situation where you see yourself as a victim. And once you're a victim, your eyes are not open to opportunities where you can help yourself. All right, because you're a victim. You don't think you're capable. You think everything is working against you. I can't do this. I can't stand this. This is too much. This is who says it's too much? There are people who are doing much more than what you're doing. So rather than look at it from that angle, look at it from the position of gratitude. Okay, I'm healthy, I'm of sound mind, I have a job, I'm being paid. Now, with the money that she's being paid, how is she delegating every other aspect of her life?
All
For
right.
it, that is
Yeah.
why, do you understand? If she's overworked, she can get people to help her with certain things. If part of her job entails probably writing projects or bringing up presentations, and she really does not have time for that, she can outsource it to somebody, give out the whatever, and then just pay the person something. Please, could you help me handle this? Then all she does is just goes through and then submits. If part of her job is working on social media or whatever the case may be, she can also outsource that. If she's a marketer in the office, again, you're
Yes.
being paid. Work with what you have. Learn to delegate and also learn to take time off. She has to learn to take time off.
To do
A
that.
lot of
Yes.
us don't think we deserve time off. A lot of us don't, even though we are working from home, we don't think we deserve
Yes.
time off. We believe that there's something I talked about in my podcast, the fear of missing out. That has become a huge psychological anxiety, right, that a lot of
For a
people
lot of
do
people.
not see, yes, for what it is. That feeling that if I'm not here, if I'm not doing this, then I'm missing out. Then maybe my boss is not seeing me working. Then maybe they will not think I am hardworking. Maybe they do not think they will not. No, like if you don't slow down, eventually you're actually gonna lose that job anyway. And the
Absolutely.
prayer is that you don't lose your life in the process.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Chris. Because if you don't slow down, you'll end up losing the job because you lose your mind, lose your life. A question comes here. Pedro is asking a question. She says, "Can
Mm,
on YouTube?" She says, "Can boundaries?" I don't get questions. I'm not getting questions from Facebook, but I have this from YouTube. Yeah, it says, "Can boundaries be set in marriage without contradicting the word of God in Ephesians 5:22?" So Ephesians 5:22, I read out, says, "Wives, Chris, Bisi, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord." So, how do we create boundaries in marriage without contradicting Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22? That's what Pedro is asking. Thank you, Pedro, for that question. Go on, Chris.
this issue of marriage is a very dicey topic. A very, very dicey topic. I think one of the reasons why people have challenges with marriages and boundaries is because we're not able to communicate their values from the very beginning. A lot of times we allow our identities just slip away, in favor of the stronger individual in the relationship, until it gets to a point where you find out that you feel that you're being oppressed, you feel that you don't know who you are anymore. People have found themselves in situations where they are in marriage for so many years, and at the end of it, they go like, "Oh, who really am I without the marriage?"
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
one of the mistakes that we've made is that by the time we go into marriage, we tend to drop who we are and try to be a vision of what society or what the culture says you should be. Now, even from the scripture that was written, when it was said, "Submit to your husbands," you know, to your husband, not to not to the societal impression of what a husband is. To your husband, you have to know who your husband is. Your husband has to know who his wife is. These are two individuals, all right, outside what the society says, that have decided to come together to say, okay, this is what we want. If they've not been able to communicate to themselves and respect those boundaries, then that challenge will consistently be there. How you set boundaries starts from the very, very beginning of your marriage, and it
That's
needs to
currently in
continue.
marriage.
Yeah, from the very beginning, and it needs to continue. Sometimes we start from the beginning and then we just let it go. Number one, because of fear. Do you understand? What do people say? Or
Absolutely.
maybe, because of fear, because you don't want to get the other person angry. Again, as I said, when people have developed a set of relationship with you, this entitlement mentality comes in. So they feel that they own you, they own your space, and then you're not wanting to hurt the person, you just allow it be. When you could have just continued in your assertiveness from how you started and say, remember, this is how it has always been. Let us try and keep it that way. And beyond just saying that, it's also important for people to know that there are consequences that come with with violations of boundaries. These are things that also need to be set in a relationship. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or whether you're a woman. If you find out that it is your boundary that is consistently being violated in favor of the other person's boundary, then you know that that is an unhealthy relationship. There's got to be some form of homeostasis, some form of balance in the relationship. There needs to be a sign that even though I'm respecting your boundaries, I also need to say that you're respecting my own boundaries. Okay? If, for instance, now we have this saying, there's this thing that's going on now. What would you say if your husband at 2 a.m. to pound? Your husband wakes you up at 2 a.m. I come and pound jam for me, I want to eat. Now, what is that? Really? When we talk about boundaries, people need to sleep. This is the hour for sleeping. Then you wake the person up to go to the kitchen at 2 p.m. to pound yam for you. Now that is violating someone's boundary. But because you've not been able to be assertive enough in setting what those boundaries, communicating what your boundaries are, you find that some women just get up and go ahead and do it. Even when they feel violated, they still go ahead and do it. And a lot of us are in such situations, all right? But it's very, 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 very important. Now, there are times that it's pretty much difficult because there are some relationships where you've tried and tried and tried. It's not like you haven't tried. There are times that you need to learn to let go. Okay, you need to learn to let go. You have indicated, when I said let go, I'm not talking about leaving the home or leaving the marriage. I'm talking about just letting go, trying to convince this person what your boundaries are, but actually living within your boundary and learning to say no. One of the things that we do is, when you're trying to explain yourself, you over explain. You really don't explain. By trying to over explain, that means you're actually begging the person to understand. And it puts you in in a position of victim. So whoever it is that has control over you now feels that, okay, yeah, okay, now feels that he's the one giving you permission, which shouldn't be the case. The case is this: these are my boundaries. This is what I need to thrive. Yes, I'm your wife. Yes, I'm your husband, but I'm also an individual. I also need to have friends of my own. I also need to have access to my phone. There's nothing wrong with watching a particular TV program of my choice. These are the things that define me. And if you're able to communicate it effectively, the other partner will know that you trying to create a boundary does not mean that you're disrespecting them. It just means that, but for me to be the best wife, the way you want me to be, allow me this space. I think that is very, very important. And we also need to know when it is time to seek outside help.
Yeah. So I was
Yeah.
going to say, I'd also like to say this to you, Pedro, to add to what she has said. It's so beautiful that the scripture that you quoted, Pedro, the question from the YouTube, the scripture you quoted in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 doesn't end there. When it talks about wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands, even as unto the Lord. It's so beautiful, you see, because God knew in his infinite mercies that we would have issues like this. And so he now goes on to verse 25 of that same scripture page. It says, husbands, love your wives even as Christ
In love.
also loved the church and gave himself for it. So, Pedro, any relationship where the wife is submitting and the husband is not loving me as Christ, the kind of love that Christ had for us was the sacrificial kind of
Yes.
love. I mean, he put his life on the line. So the Bible doesn't say that it was the people that died for Christ. Christ died. So if the wife is at the point where the submission is affecting her mental wellness, she's not, she can't even perform as a wife optimally. And then she needs help, really, like Chris said. You see, the problem is a lot of times we take scriptures, we pick a verse of the scripture, and people just run with
And
it.
run
And so
with
you
it.
would have to
Yeah.
submit. But the point is, when you see women who are submissive to their spouses, you don't know how much love the guy is showering on her. You don't know the
Exactly.
sacrifices the gentleman is making in his marriage. And so you see, Bisi, who probably talks about her husband, who would be glad to do anything for her husband. You don't know the sacrifices of the gentleman probably going in BRT and letting me drive the car. You don't know. So we don't have the full picture. But the picture that we have, which gives us assurance, is the totality of the word of God. And I'm talking to you, Pedro, and anybody else who's listening there. I believe in submission of the wife in marriage. But more importantly, I believe in the verse 25 of Ephesians also that says, my husband should love me even as Christ loved the church, giving himself for me, for the children. That is ensuring that I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm comfortable. I'm not under pressure because of his people. I'm not under, my in-laws don't put me under pressure. That means he defends me. Of course, when all that's come into play, he loves me, I love him, we submit, I submit, he loves me, and then we live happily ever after, managing the individual differences. Of course, that will be there. But so please, Pedro, any man who is harping on Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 should also be told to go to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, because that is the conclusion of the whole matter. And like you said, I mean, like I love talking about that really. Ephesians 5:22 is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. And then, like Chris said also, I think in our marriages, we need to know when to ask for help. And I'll come to this. A young lady is talking to me, and especially, thank you very much for that, Pedro. Pedro says creating boundaries does not connote disrespect. Sacrifice is necessary from both parties, and they should all understand. Thank you very much, Pedro. I'm glad you got that. Okay, so I'm talking about this also, talking about creating boundaries for our mental wellness. This lady calls me, and we're having this conversation. I hope she tuned in because I really wanted her to hear your comment, really. And she tuned in, and she called me, and we're having this conversation about she's married to this guy, but the guy treats her like dirt and whatever. And it's so bad. I mean, it's affected her psychologically. It's so bad that they had to call a meeting at work to tell her that she's not performing optimally any longer. And she goes to me. He ridicules her. Sometimes he wakes her up in the middle of the night and makes her do some stupid things, like gets her out of bed and goes, you can't sleep on the bed. I bought the bed. Stand there. And she's made to do things like that. So, oh yes. So I hope she's listening because I really sent her. I called her this morning. And so at a point, she ran away from the marriage because she said she was losing it. Her boss was saying she could lose her job because sometimes she just starts crying. She's walking on the road. She doesn't know what's happening. Do you understand? The guy dehumanizes her, throws out, they're driving. The guy sends her out of the car. Sometimes that says, get out of my car in the middle of the road and things like that. And so she went home. And her mother said to her, no, that she has to go back home. That every woman is enduring their marriage. And so she can't be an exception. But she says to me, she goes, Pastor Bisi, I'm going crazy. I want to leave. I want to leave. What should I do? So, Chris, what should she do?
Yeah.
We're talking relationships and mental wellness.
You see, the problem is we are so focused on building relationships with other people. We forget that the most important relationship we need to build is a relationship with ourselves. We are so focused on external relationships. We forget that self-relationship is the foundation of everything good and also everything bad that happens to us. The kind of relationship you build with yourself is key. For a while now, the focus has been on self-love, has been on self-care, has been on self-awareness because we have come to realize that we are living for other people and forgetting ourselves in the process. The reason why it is easy to be treated that way is because you don't know who you are.
Wow. Thank you.
If you spend time with yourself, and you begin to love yourself, the funny thing about spending time with yourself is the same way as trying to build a relationship with someone else. When you're trying to build a romantic relationship with someone else, you see the person's faults and you see the person's positives. But what do? You try to hype the positive, and then we try to, just push down, suppress the faults, right? Because in our minds, we are all human beings. The way we treat other people, if only we could treat ourselves a fraction of that way, would see the huge difference it would make. Begin to love yourself. Begin to see yourself for who you are. It does not matter what anybody has told you about you. What matters is what you tell yourself about you. You are the one that determines how people will treat you. If you believe that you are trash, trust me, you are trash. Because unconsciously and subconsciously, you will embody that identity and people will begin to see it in you. It begins to affect how you reason, it begins to affect how you think. You do not think you are worth your job, you do not think you are worth being loved, you do not think you're pretty, you do not think you deserve respect. It all comes down to how you see yourself. By the time you remove yourself from that, I'm married to this person. Yes, I do love this person. But this can actually know you better than nobody can know you better than you. But if you don't spend time with yourself, you wouldn't know that. That's why it would be easy for somebody to say, nobody loves you, and you believe it. It would be easy for someone to say, oh, Chris, you're so ugly, you're so worthless, and you believe it because you don't know who you are. You depend on other people to tell you who you are.
For
Now,
affirmation.
it takes a process. Yes, it takes a process of mental isolation to be able to groom yourself away from such years of degradation. You need to be able to mentally. You need to be able to put yourself in a space where that's part of the boundaries, right? You need to be able to create a boundary mentally. Nothing is going to go beyond this space. There should be a
Oh wow, Chris, we lost you there again. Mental isolation. You need to. Oh, I hope you can come back on again, Chris, please. We're talking about how do we deal with. I mean, like the instance I gave. Oh, please go on, Chris. I want to hear about that mental isolation and why we need to do that. Please go on, my darling. I need to hear that. Go on.
So the mental isolation is very, very important. We talk about one of the practices that we do, especially in our stress mastery classes, is called mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is just a practice whereby you put yourself in your present. What it does, it teaches you gratitude. It teaches you to be aware of yourself. It teaches you, a lot of people think it's about meditation, but it's beyond meditation. It's about trying to relate with who you are, all right? And it tells you, because one of the things that causes stress and anxiety is when we constantly think of the past and when we are anxious of tomorrow. So, what
Yes.
mindfulness does for you is to put you in a situation where you are grateful for today, you are aware of what you can control, and you do not stress yourself over what you cannot control. For instance, if you have such a husband, you can't control him. So, why are you bothered? So, who can you control? It is you at that point that you can control. You have power over. So what you need to do is sit down and begin to ask yourself questions. When he tells me this is who I am, how do I feel? Why do I feel that way? Do I believe it? Why do I believe it? Then you begin to counter it. But Chris, I'm beautiful. You begin to remember all this that you've been able to attain. You begin to
Achieve in
remember all
life.
the good things that happened to you. And then you bring those things back to your present. And then it begins to show you your capacity. It begins to show you what you are about. And then
Yeah.
a lot of times, when we find ourselves in such situations and then we block our minds to the good about us, right? And we insult and the degradation. We forget that we have a lot of people outside who are looking onto us, um, who actually look up to us. A lot of times we do not know that we have people who look up to us because we have so brought ourselves down. But by the time you begin to practice mindfulness, by the time you begin to embody your essence, then your eyes begin to open to all they say like attracts like. By the
Absolutely.
time you begin to see the positivity about you, you find that you begin to receive all these positive vibes. And then you're wondering, you mean, why wasn't I seeing all this before? Because your brain and your space was being consumed by negativity. And let me shock you, by the time you change, and by the time you set, I know sometimes your boundaries, you don't have to be too vocal about your boundaries. Sometimes when you find that you have somebody that you cannot change in your life, you let the person be. As you let the person be, your attitude your reactions, your responses, you find responses begin to change. Where you used to be angry and shout and all that, you don't bother anymore because you know there's no point. I can't change him. It's not my job to change him. And by the time you start changing yourself, you find that your environment begins to toe the line. Before long, that same person that has been degrading you would either stop or would leave your life.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Chris. So self goes self-evaluation and worth assessments will be necessary. Page goes be your own cheerleader. Race goes, Oladapo goes mindfulness, an antidote for worry, is it? Yes, it is. I mean, being able to look at yourself inward from what Chris has said would help. But Chris, can I ask a question? Since we're talking mental wellness, in this part of the
Mm.
world, we don't seem to think there's a need to see a therapist. This part of the world,
Ah,
people don't think that they think it's they won't people would readily stigmatize one if you said like this lady in question obviously needs help because the way she's thinking, what she's thinking about herself, and even the conversation she can't. I mean, just the way she is. So where does at what point do I need help concerning my mental wellness? I'm in work, I'm under pressure at work, it's in my relationship with my parents, my relationship with my spouse. At what point does one seek for help? And should one really seek for help?
okay. You know what you said that this part of the world. The funny thing is, the research came out recently. It's not just this part of the world. All blacks generally. It's a black thing. This thinking that I mean, we don't need therapists, or think that you're seeing a therapist is a sign of weakness. All right, they see it as a white man syndrome. Even Black Americans actually think that way. It's a white man syndrome. Black people don't need therapists. All right.
Mm,
Now,
mm,
one of the things that people need to understand, and I like the fact that we are talking a lot more about mental health issues these days,
yes.
because now we realize that your mental health is responsible for every other aspect of you. Your physical health depends on your mental health. If we
Mm,
are willing to go to the doctor when we stub our foot on a stone, then why don't you think you deserve to see someone when your emotions are ragged, torn to
mm,
pieces? You know,
mm,
this idea that we can do everything by ourselves, all
mm.
right, is what is actually keeping us in level. That is why we have a spike, especially
Mm,
amongst blacks in recent times. That is why we have a spike in mental health challenges, depression, suicidal attempts, or whatnot, because of the
true.
same mentality. I'm a black, we take care of
Mm,
ourselves, we don't suffer. But you're a human being with blood running through your veins, as with the white man, right? We all have feelings. We all find ourselves in situations that we cannot handle. When you
yeah.
need to see someone, because I told somebody the other day, because she was asking, I said, it's not really everybody that needs a stress mastery coach. It's not everybody that needs. So you need to be able to know there are some people that, because again, your ability to to overcome a challenge actually depends on your own personality, depends on the experiences that
Okay.
you've had, depends on the resilience that you've been able to build. There are people on this earth who are so resilient, so resilient. They can go through anything and come out smelling like roses. All right. And they are not pretending, they are not faking it. They are truly resilient. Such people really do not need help. But there are some who are consistently struggling.
Mm,
Consistently. There's a dampening in your spirit every
yeah.
day. As each day goes by, there's a dampening. It does not matter the good that happens to you. You really
Mm,
cannot see the beauty of life. When you
mm,
begin to speak despondency into your life, into your well-being, when you don't deserve to live, at
mm,
that point help. And I need to also
mm,
talk to people, other people as well, who are in these other people's space. I put up a
mm.
post recently and I said sometimes, because there's a saying that people who are suicidal don't cry out, they just commit the suicide. I, those that is a very ignorant statement. When you say people who are suicidal, they don't, when they are crying out, that means they don't mean it. They're only seeking attention. But
Oh,
the idea that you're using suicide to seek for attention already puts a red flag up that there's a problem somewhere.
sure.
So we also need to learn when people cry out to us, the way they cry out to us when they say they have kidney failure, we should also treat them that same way when they come to you depressed and crying and saying that they see no reason why they should be alive. It's the same thing. Somebody cries and that they just found out they have stage 4 cancer. What do? Somebody comes to you and says, I've been depressed for 5 years. And for each of those years, I've attempted suicide 10 times. And then you shove it off like, yeah, right. But are you not here? So people can be very insensitive when it comes to issues like that.
Yes.
If you
Yes.
wanted to kill yourself, you'd have killed yourself since now. There are different ways. Do you want me to tell you the ways you can? Such insensitivity. That's why a lot of times people just close up. All right, they are going through so much, but they can't talk because whatever it is that they are going through is going to be taken for granted. It's going to be
Yes.
insulted, and people will just assume they are seeking attention. Who wants to seek? The fact that you're using such things to seek for attention means that something
It's,
is
it's
already
something.
wrong.
Yeah.
Something is already wrong somewhere that we need to address.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. I mean, we okay. So, oh boy, I think you've been able to. Okay, so there are institutions that provide care. I mean, like you've just said, one needs to find and get help really. And so,
And
Chris,
we,
I know you're.
yeah,
Okay, go on, go on.
no, no, I want to say something. We also need to be very careful with who we approach for help. All right.
Why is this?
Not why is this? Again, there are actually some experts who believe that it's not everybody that cries out, that's suicidal, that cries out for help. You get what I mean? Your spirit has to be in tune. Most times people rush to supposed professionals who are noisemakers. All right.
Absolutely.
Now, a lot of all these noisemakers really are just floating on the success of the wellness bandwagon. All right.
Can I
And they are
can I come in
using
there?
it for their,
Can I
yes.
just come in there? You take your thought from there. I just want to say this concerning what you said. And so I had a conversation with the gentleman, the 30 plus year old gentleman that I talked to in the course of the
Mm,
week. And
yeah.
I asked him if he had sought help in any way. The one who I said had a
Mm-hmm.
low childhood. And do you know what he said, Chris? He said to me, yes, I have. He said, but a lot of people out there don't understand what I'm going through. And so what it means is
True.
they are just giving you cancer from their head. The heart is not really there, right?
Mm.
So go on with this, your
You,
bandwagon
you,
wellness people out there.
yeah. That's why sometimes I'm not very comfortable with people going to pastors for mental health problems. All right. Um, when I was hosting a radio show at one point, I had somebody who called me who had a serious issue, and then I directed him to someone whom I thought was a mental health expert. So I asked him to get in touch with me so that I know how far. And then 2 days later, he calls me. Was it 2 or 3 days later? He calls me. He thanked me for the person's contact. I had spoken with the person. I was like, "What's the problem? What happened? How did it go?" This is someone that has been sexually sodomized by his mom when he was a child. So he grew up with that pain, with that. And at this point, I think the mom was old, was aged, and he had to be taking care of her. But he kept remembering everything that she did to him. So he felt, yeah, so he felt like, just giving up. And I sent him to this person. Guess what he said? He said the person just told him, you know what, you should pray, and the person gave him scriptural passages to read. He then told me, he said, "But Chris, these are the things that I know already." Do you get what I'm saying? So we
Yeah.
need to be we need to be very careful. And again, mental health diagnosis and mental health practices or treatments are not mass products. It's not a one
Mm,
size fits all. So
true.
you need to be able if somebody comes to you and says, this is who I am, and then you're speaking to the person, and from what the person is saying, you realize that the person is talking to you from a generic point of view, all right,
Yes.
then you have to really escape, because that person is not seeing you for who you are. That person is already working under the assumption, which is wrong, ethically wrong, because that's not what we've been trained to do, which is
Mm-hmm.
ethical, because you cannot use another person's situation to diagnose another one's situation. They are all different. Backgrounds are different. Experiences are different. So somebody comes in and gives you a generic, whatever, generic solution, generic treatment, then the person is not good. That's why I find a lot of people are a lot dissatisfied with some of the therapy that they've actually paid for, some of the counseling sessions, right? Because it
Yes.
takes a lot
Yes.
more. It takes an ability to get this person to really question themselves. And
Yes.
sometimes that questioning can be ugly. I told some people, you have to be ready to see the darkness in your heart.
Yes.
The only way you can appreciate the light that you are is when you see that darkness, because we
Mm.
all have a degree of darkness in our
Yeah.
hearts, a degree of, some shady things, but we just
Mm.
shift it aside, we shove it under the carpet, we don't want to talk about it.
Yes.
But unless you are
Yes.
able to confront it, and if you are able to get somebody to confront those things, you find that that
Mm.
person is way on his way to recovery. And
Absolutely.
facing it, and it's also a thin line. There's also a thin line to this thing, because facing it can also be an act of despondency. So that person also has to be strong in some ways to know that acknowledging that, okay, I have this part of me that is this
Yeah.
dark, does not mean
Yeah.
that it defines me.
So
Some people
what
will
next?
see that, then just go like, okay, this is me. All
Yeah.
right.
What
So you
next?
need
So what are
somebody
you going
that
to do
can.
with this?
Exactly. Do you get? So you need to be able to shift from there and go to the light that is you. There is always an equal and opposite reaction, and
Mm.
equal and opposite situation for everybody. So there's a negative aspect of you. There is an equal and opposite aspect of that. So we need to focus on that. And the reason why we tell people to look into their darkness is so that when they are in their light, it defines what their light is, and it defines for them why they really do not need to go back into that darkness.
Wow.
But
Thank
if
you
you're
very
not
much for
able
that,
to
Chris.
Yeah, but if you're
Okay,
not
go on. Go
able to
on.
see that if you're not able to see that darkness, because when we live in denial, when we live in denial, again, you live in denial, you begin to assume things, you begin to have this entitlement mentality, you feel that all is well with you. It's actually easier for you to stray back into the darkness, because you know you are denying something to yourself. So even your happiness is not pure. Your
At
happiness is
all.
not true. It's not true happiness. So that's why it's easy for you if anything happens, the despondency,
Take
because you
over.
don't. Yes, because you're hiding that aspect of you. That part of
Yes.
me is
Take over
ugly.
again. Mm. Mm.
That when people tell you that you cannot shame the shameless,
Mm.
you know that saying, I've
Yes. No?
accepted that this is who I am.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
assume I have a past. Oh yeah, so I had 20 abortions in my 20s. All right. But it doesn't change who I am today. But if in having the 20 abortions in my 20s, I decide to shove it under the carpet and I decide to hide, I don't want anybody to see. Now,
Mm.
any little thing that anybody does, in my head, I'll think, oh my God, do they know
That's
that
why.
aspect of me?
That's it.
Do they know? That's why. That's why. That is why. So you
Mm.
find that in your attempt to be happy, what you're trying to do is actually trying to subjugate that aspect of you, and that is unhealthy. So you need to be able to see
Fantastic.
yourself for you, for who you are, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then mentally, consciously, intentionally, and voluntarily
Begin to
decide
deal with that.
I would rather be the good. And when you do that, in spite of everything around you, you find that it's easier to live that life and be
Mm.
happy in the choices that you make, because it doesn't bother what anybody says about you anymore, because you know already.
Touch it down.
Like
Yeah.
what else are you gonna tell me? But I've chosen
Yes.
this is where I'm going. Yes.
So it's I'll take that as a full disclosure with yourself first. I mean, like you're doing it because I was told, I think one of the problems is we are not true to ourselves, like you said.
No, we are
Talking to
not.
this young gentleman, I shared some personal things about my life with him, and his mouth was just like that. And so I said to him, so he went, so how did you get out of this? I said I first had to deal with that past because I had to make myself understand that the fact that these people in my life had been this way, they're chosen to live their lives that way, does not and
Mm.
should not define who I should become. I said, so
Mm.
one, I'm not ashamed to talk about my past. Yeah, I'm not ashamed
Uh-huh.
to talk about it. But I
Mm-hmm.
definitely am not staying in my past because I know I have a new present. And that's just the way it is.
Mm.
And so I would
Mm.
stand in public places and I would tell stories about the past I've lived and how it could
Mm-hmm.
have defined me if I'd stayed there. And you know, and I was talking to him, and it was like, you mean
Mm-hmm.
you went through that? Did that happen to you? I said, yes, it
Mm-hmm.
happened to me. I said, but guess what? These individuals who were this way, I mean, who were that way, right, rather at that point, probably didn't
Mm.
understand why they were behaving that way. I said, so for a long time, I was walking in the shadow of who they are. And so I was looking at my life. I'm like, hey, Simio, can you imagine? This is what happened. And then it just happened. And I'm like, oh, come on, BC. You can't keep living your life this way. But I said to him one thing. I didn't see a therapist. I didn't have a
Mm.
life coach. I said, what happened to
Mm.
me was I met with Jesus genuinely. And I can, because he was asking me, how did you come to be like this? I said, come to think of it. I said, I didn't have the luxury of having this conversation like you're having with me. I didn't have that luxury because people
Mm.
didn't understand what I was going through. I said, but
At
I
that
met
time,
with,
yes.
yes, I said, yes. I said, I met with Christ and it changed everything. And I said to him, I think, and
Mm.
I said, I believe that at the point where I was in my foolish way of life, by virtue of the growing up, the childhood I'd had, I'd lived in. I
Mm.
said, you know, God loved me. He was there in the shadows. He was guiding me because he knew
Mm.
someday this story of what I'd been through in life would be helping
Mm.
someone.
Mm.
So I said to him, it's not just
Mm-hmm.
enough for you to
Mm-hmm.
say you find Christ. There's also
Mm-hmm.
a need for you to let him do what he wants to do with your life. That's the yieldedness. So you
Exactly.
see a priest who is a therapist, and she talks you through certain things. How willing and ready are you? I mean, you're telling me someone beats you every day, someone dehumanizes you, someone tells you to get off the bed that he bought with his money, makes you stand all night, and take counsel from someone you respect, a spiritual leader, and he says, guess what? Get out of this relationship for now. Let people who are elders in your
Mm-hmm.
family talk to them. And you don't heed
Mm-hmm.
that. I said to her, I said,
Mm.
someday, it's either out of frustration you kill him, or the guy out of frustration kills you. I said, and so where does that leave anybody? So it's not just enough to hear
Mm.
this. How willing and open are you to responding to the right counsel? You know, I said, seek help. And so
Mm.
I come to you, I seek help. But how willing and how ready are we to listen to that? So that's a question for
Mm.
everybody out there from what Chris has said. So, Chris, I'd like to say, just tell us, for everybody and anybody listening out there, what would be your parting thoughts today? What would you like to say to anybody who's going through mental health issues
Okay.
from relationship?
Okay. So we've talked
Or
about so
anything
many
else
things.
you'd
One
like
of
to
the
add at that I haven't
right.
said?
No problem. We talked about so many things, and I want to stress a little bit more on this issue of trying to identify with your past. All right, trying to identify with the darkness, the dark side of you, and trying to embrace the light side of you. There's something called your identity in quotes, right? So you have a failure identity, you have a success identity. Sometimes some people tend to have failure identity to get whatever it is that they want. All right. There's a need that they have, there's a crutch that they need to hold on to. So the attention that they are from their failure identities serves their purpose at that time. It kind of like enables their entitlement. And let me try to explain that. For instance, it's easy for me to, rather than get up and get going, I can go maybe to person A and cry out my heart. Everything that I've gone through in this life. Oh, in 2012, in 2013, in 2014, and then you keep listening, and the person goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry." You know, this pity party thing. Some people crave for that kind of attention. All right, that is unhealthy. That is not a situation that enables you grow, because you find yourself in that position. That's why some people can never leave a particular position, no matter what they do, no matter how they try. because in their heads, if they don't keep telling these stories, they cannot get the benefit that comes with the stories. You need to learn to balance out everything. Even though you're talking about your failures, even though you're talking about the dark side of you, that is not who you are now. You need to understand that. So even when you are seeking help, it's not about this, that. It's about, okay, this is who I am, but I'm still having to deal with a fallout from what happened to me in 2013. How do I heal? That is a different situation than going, in 2013, I was this and I feel so. I don't know if you get the difference. Yes, so we need to be able to separate that. That being said, we've had a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much, Bisi, for doing
Yes.
this. I'm really, really grateful. And one thing about mental health that we can't take away is this: the power is in your hand. That's why it's called mental health. That's why it's called mental wellness. It's not somebody else's responsibility. It doesn't matter what we say, it doesn't matter how often we say it, but to whoever is listening, what matters is what that person is willing to do with what he or she has heard.
Absolutely.
A coach's job is not to tell you what to do. A coach's job is never to tell you what to do. A coach's job is to guide you on a journey of self-discovery so that you can
Absolutely.
begin to make the right choices for yourself
Choice.
that
Yeah.
applies to your own peculiar situation. So you need to be very careful when you're taking advice and stuff from other people, especially people who do not know your own life story. Because everything I've said here now, I do not everybody that's watching or listening, I really do not know what each person is going through.
Going
So
through. Yeah.
what you need to do is one thing that is constant is to be able to overcome whatever mental health challenges that you're going through. You need to be able to know who you are. You need to be able
Yeah.
to create a beautiful self relationship with yourself. You need to be able to love yourself in spite of everything that you have gone through, despite everything you have heard about yourself. By the time you tell yourself that you're deserving and you're worthy of love as the next
Yeah.
person, you begin to
Yeah.
see that there comes a difference in your step. When you wake up in the morning, you look at yourself in the mirror and begin to speak words
Absolutely.
of affirmation to yourself. Everything you wished your loved ones could tell you, you be your own loved one, be your own best friend, be your own lover, so to speak. Pay yourself those compliments that you want people to pay you and stop depending on external validation. By the time you are able to build yourself mentally to a point, you find that you really do not need external validations anymore. What they do is basically confirm what you already know if they do
No.
come. You don't need them, but when they do come, you appreciate it. But you're like, yeah, I know that already. But not a case of somebody telling you and you go like, oh, really? Is that who I am? No. You need to know yourself. And this world actually, I don't know why it's like that, but that's how the world is. The world actually works in favor of those
Thank you.
who are self-aware.
Thank you.
The moment you are self-aware and you're self, you find that the world works in your favor. And it does not matter you're thin or you're young or you're old. If you notice with children who are very
Yes.
confident, you find that even in school, their class, you find that just without them even asking or demanding for it, certain responsibilities come
People
their way.
describe it
For
to
no
them.
reason,
Yes.
this child is made a class captain. For no reason, this child has friends flocking around him. Why? Is it different from
Yeah.
the other person? No. But the mental difference is the fact that this one is more assured of who he is. And I
Right.
think that is also a focus on parenting. I think we should also talk about this. Parenting is
Yes.
a very, very important role when it comes to
Yeah.
building strong mental health, mentally healthy
Help.
people, maybe individuals. Do you understand? If I'm able
Yes.
to tell my child today everything he needs to learn about himself and I build in him, I give him the tools that he needs
Connect.
to boost his confidence, to boost his mental health, it will be easier for such a child to navigate the roads of life.
Absolutely.
A lot of
Thank you.
times we teach our children things, we do not teach them life coping skills. So I think that's also very, very,
That's
very
important.
important.
Yes. Thank you very much for that, Chris. Cephas says
No
here,
problem.
I think even the stone hard and resilient also need to share with trusted ones because nobody has infinite ability to cope with every tough situation of life. We all do have endurance limits. So find people that you can share with, people you can talk to. I've had a very interesting conversation with Chris today. She said we need set of rules to guide how people relate with us. She says if you don't have values, you can't set healthy boundaries. So, what are your values? What are your values? The values you hold on to in life will determine how well you are able to keep to the boundaries. She talked about the intellectual, the physical, and sexual, emotional boundaries. She says we need to
I
be in
forgot to
touch
talk
with
about
our
them.
feelings. We need to be in touch with our feelings also. Also, she said something that was quite profound. She said there's a need for us to set healthy boundaries, to be able to do this effectively, that we must separate our feelings from other people's feelings. That is the ability for you not to be your joy shouldn't be dependent on somebody else's, really. Be careful, really, be wary of dependent relationships. Um, a great deal she has spoken about today. Also, we should peel off the layers, be real, peel off the layers, and stop carrying baggage around. Find out who you really are. Beneath the dirt and the grit, there is pure gold and diamond. That's why I say to myself all the time. We should nothing in life is rigid. And then someone asked a question about how do you know the balance? I said, read the story of Moses in the Bible. He was going to kill himself, wear himself out, and wear the people out as well. Someone asked the question about submission, and we said, tell the people who talk about submissive wives to also read from Ephesians 5:25 as well, that the Bible says that the husband should love as Jesus loved.
Husbands
And that,
too should love their wives.
so
Yes.
Chris talked also about putting our priorities into context, communicating to our employers really without being rude, and that is very important here. She talked about a great deal, and so if you missed this or there's someone you believe should watch this, please tell them to view this on my YouTube channel, Bisi Ibitayo. Someone says here that okay, talking about boundaries, how do you deal with a wife who leaves her space in the wardrobe and comes to your side of the wardrobe? Isn't that overshooting your boundaries? LOL. Thank you very much for that, Cephas. You will endure that one, though, because women need more space than men when it comes to wardrobe. Chris, I've had a very interesting conversation with you, and I know I'm going to be bringing you back
So have
someday
I.
because we need to talk about this the more. I see a lot of people going through
Yeah.
issues. And can I also say this, if you're listening out there, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It will be nice for you to talk to someone. It's always nice to talk to someone. It helps a great deal to talk to someone. Stop bottling up so much. There are people, I mean, there are people who will be glad to listen to you. They don't have to wear the toga of a coach or whatever. I'm not saying necessarily go to your pastor, but there must be some people that you feel that you can open up to. Talking about it often makes us feel better. It does that with me. There are issues going on in my mind. By the time I share with a few trusted people in my circle, I feel better even though the solution hasn't come. Please talk to someone. Create
Hasn't
healthy
become, yeah.
boundaries because your mental wellness depends on it. 30 seconds, Chris, as we
Mm.
go off. 30 seconds for you. Parting word.
For me, okay, parting words.
30
Well,
seconds.
I mean, you've just said it because what was on my mind was basically having a good support system. You know, even though your support system starts from within, but social beings, right? We don't live in isolation. So it's important you have a network of people who kind of like share your values, who you can talk to, just as you said, you know. If you find yourself in a situation that is unhealthy, you need to learn to counter that, create a healthy counterpart to that, so that you can feed off from what it is that you're lacking on this other side. The most important thing is no matter what it is that you're going through, remember that you're not alone. You are never alone. If you're a Christian, if you are a Muslim, whatever it is, you reach in and count the God that you serve, right? And then speak to him in prayer, meditate, find out what it is that you need to do with yourselves. But it's very important. Build yourself healthy relationship. It doesn't have to be a crowd. It can be one, it can be two people that you can always rely on at any time to help you. Because I
Yes.
mean, we
Wow.
all
Thank
need
you
it
very
in a
much for
while. No
that,
matter how
Chris. It was really
strong
nice
we are,
having
no matter how strong we. Yes.
Okay. I was just rounding off. I think the air. I just went off air. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. So till next time when I see you, thank you for doing this with us, Chris. Although the network was really one kind, but then we had a nice time.
Yeah,
So
the
please,
network. Yeah,
so we'll see
the
you
network. I
again.
think it's the Hamatan, the
I
this
believe
the
so.
dust and everything.
I believe so. Thank you again, Chris. To have a beautiful weekend. And so thank you very much again, everybody, for being with me on this edition of Banter with BC. Tracing boundaries and mental wellness. Till I see you again next time, my name is Olabisi Bitaya. Do have a beautiful weekend. Bye bye.